I know those lights are bright. I also know it's warm in here. Sorry. This room is either really hot or uncomfortably cold. And for some reason, we can't find the balance. But that's all right. I want to give a quick shout out to a couple people. First is Kylie and Isaac. Awesome. Shouting out Isaac. Not even here. So that means he loses it. So I'm going to shout out Kylie real quick. Oh, there's Isaac. I want to shout them out. One of my favorite things is watching people grow and progress within worship. I'm complimenting you. Listen. Jeez. Anyway, I love watching people grow, and you two have grown so much with worship. Honestly, you've done an amazing job. Isaac, I love watching you just like worship and just get into it. Kylie, girl, your voice is bomb. So good. So good. So I just want you two to know we love you and we're super proud of you guys. You did a good job. Also, I want to give a quick shout out. It was Benny's first week doing the bass, and he also left. Oh, hey, bud. Benny, you did. Noah, that was an inappropriate comment. Benny, you did hey, Benny, I want you to know you did a great job on the bass. Way to step up. Benny's been learning recently. So, Benny, good job. Proud of you. So, just want to give him a quick shout out. Can we give it up for those, and just the worship team? Can we give it up for the worship team real quick? I want you guys to know, you might have noticed this, I love a good stop and start in worship. That's where the music stops and then it starts again. Some of you are like, oh. I love that. But one of the things tonight, I love the moment where we stopped in the chorus and it was just you guys singing. I think that is one of the coolest things ever. I heard somebody last night actually, he was talking about how there are angels in heaven and they present these I'm trying to remember what they were called. It's not a bucket because that's not spiritual. It's a bowl. We'll just say a bowl. But they present these bowls to God, and they are full of the prayers and the praises of the saints. So, there are angels that are presenting to God your praise. So, this is hard to wrap your mind around a little bit, but I think it's really cool. I want you to imagine, as you're praising God, there are angels that are look at your people praising you. So, there are angels standing in heaven go, hey, God, there's a group of high schoolers down there. Not that he doesn't know, but that are look at what these students in Tualatin are doing. Look at what these high schoolers are doing. Look at what they're doing. I just think it's super cool. So, I love hearing you guys just worship. I have a question I want to ask you guys. When you guys, especially when you were growing up, did you ever watch a movie and then place yourself in that movie? Go, you know what? That character's me. For example, you go to a movie with a friend and your friend's like, okay, if we were in that movie, who would you be? And you're like, you know the super good-looking main character? That's me. And you know the dumb friend? That's you. And your friend's like, false. You're the sidekick of the villain. And you're like, no, that's not true. I'm definitely the hero type. Okay, have you ever done that? Yeah? I want you guys to think real quick, who is the character in a movie that is you? Who is you? But be realistic. Jacoby, you are not Spider-Man. You are the guy in the chair for Spider-Man. Jacoby's Ned. Jacoby, I know you want to be Spider-Man. Yeah, cool. Because you're supporting Spider-Man, because you're not Spider-Man. So listen up. Shh. There's a couple characters that I have found that I think are me. Do you guys remember the movie Atlantis? The old Disney movie? Okay. I am a lot like that main character because listen up. Shh. When I was a kid, I was always talking about what I was going to do one day. Always. Like, I got in trouble in kids' time when I was 7 because I was talking, and the kids' pastor goes, "Hey, Brogan, I've told you, you're talking too much." And I looked at him, and I was like, I understand that, Mr. Phillips, but this kid asked me what I want to do one day when I grow up, and I'm trying to tell him the full plan of what I'm going to do in ministry when I grow up. And he goes, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, this kid's not listening to me." And he goes, "You're not listening to me." And I was like, "I'm talking about Jesus. You're just talking about yourself." And he goes, "That's disrespectful." And I was like, "But it's true." And then he was like, "Mr. Brogan, you're going to go sit in the corner." And I was like, "Are you kidding?" Hey, guys, over here. I don't want to split, so let's focus up. Okay? Thank you. So that's one character that I relate to. Sadly, another character I relate to is just any hobbit from Lord of the Rings. They live peaceful lives. They live in a hobbit hole. In a hole in the ground. There lived a hobbit. I would live that life. I would be so comfortable living that life because they eat, and then when they're done eating, they go and have a meal together. That sounds amazing. Hey, guys, seriously, thank you. I would do that all day. I would so do that. How many of you have seen the Lord of the Rings or Hobbit movies? Raise your hand. Guys, yes, that's Gimli. So, yeah, okay. Okay. So, they complain because they don't have second breakfast. That sounds incredible. Like, nothing like topping off like a good omelet and toast with some pancakes, you know? Like, that sounds amazing. So, real quick, talk with the people next to you. What is a movie or TV show character that you were like, that is me? Go. All right. Shh. Okay. Sarah just said I'm Po from Kung Fu Panda. Think that's just a fat joke, but listen up. Shh. Okay, I want to hear one from this section. That's realistic. Hayden. You're Hey Hey from Moana? Yes, you are. That's amazing. Okay, this section. River. I can't comment on that. But so far, we have not heard an incorrect answer. This group, Reed. Bro, come on. You are not Anakin Skywalker. You are not, Reed. I'm sorry. No. Reed, you know who you are? Noah, you've seen all the Star Wars movies with me. In Attack of the Clones, you know the guy that Obi-Wan goes to that owns the restaurant? And he walks out and he's like, I know about a Camino dart. I'm kidding. All right, Reed thinks he's Anakin Skywalker. Okay, Kyle? That might be the best answer we've gotten today. Noah. Who? Oh, okay. Shh. Cody. What do you mean you're kind of Megamind? You are absolutely Megamind. You don't have a big head, but you definitely are Megamind. Like, you're a villain that's so bad at being a villain, you're a good guy. That's mega. Yeah. All right. So, Isaac, what? Yeah, I've heard of Shakespeare once or twice. No, I don't. Sorry. I know I don't just read. Oh my gosh. All right. Okay, so shh. I ask you that because I'm about to make the most boring pastor transition into the series talk ever. You ready? God has created you with a role all for yourself. I know. You guys are like, wow, he worked hard on that one this week. But listen up. I want to think about something. So I played a song called Uncomfortable by Andy Mineo. This song talks about the comfort that Christians often live in, that we resort to. I watched an interview that he was talking about this because his whole album was called Uncomfortable. And they were like, aren't you kind of calling Christians out? And he goes, that's what I want to do. We're really good at checking the boxes we need to get to heaven and then just calling it good. Like, I need Jesus in my heart, check. I need to be baptized, check. That's it. I'll show up to church every once in a while, make sure I'm checked in there. Sometimes when a missionary shows up, I'll give a little money and help support the missionary. And I'll try to be nice to the people that I like so then I can say that I'm loving everybody. But the truth is, I don't love everybody. I judge a lot of people, and I don't like a lot of people. But they don't like me either, so I can justify it. Makes sense. So the point of this song was he wanted to challenge Christians. He talked about how we are comfortable in the way we live, the way we approach things. So I played that song, and there's a line at the beginning that seems to leap out to me every time I hear it. It says, nobody told me we could die like this. And he wrote that song because he knew a guy one time that had lived his entire life and had never heard the gospel. Had never heard the good news of Jesus Christ. And this guy said, nobody told me that the way I was living was going to kill me. Nobody told me that what I was doing was bad. And so he puts that line at the beginning of this song as a way of saying, nobody is telling people. So I want you to think for a second. I want you to think about the friends and the family you have in your life, the people that you know in your life. I want you to think if they stood before Jesus today, would they say, nobody told me? Would they say, nobody told me the way I was living was wrong? Now, I know that's not quite an excuse. The Bible talks about that there's enough proof and enough knowledge, and there's enough in the world for us to recognize that there's a creator, that there's more beyond us. And the Bible also gives an example that you don't need to actually say the words, Jesus, would you come into my life? And you don't need to be baptized to go to heaven, because the thief on the cross, all he said was he acknowledged that Jesus was Lord. All he did was acknowledge that Jesus was who he said he was, and Jesus looked at him and said, you will be with me in paradise today. I heard a preacher talk about that story one time, and he goes, I want you to think about the moment that guy, that criminal on the cross, walks into heaven. He goes, I know we always think of heaven as like you walk up to the gates, and there's like a ticket booth, and they like check to see if you're there. So this, he goes, go with me. Imagine this guy walks up, and we'll say St. Peter's there. And he's like, name? And the guy's like, criminal on the right cross. And he's like, okay. And he goes, all right, well, tell me about your faith story. When did you accept Jesus into your heart? I never did that. Oh, okay. Well, baptized? No. Okay, well, tell me about your ideas of faith. Like, talk to me about like justification and sanctification and how you became more like Christ. Talk to me about that. And the guy's like, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he's like, oh. And Peter's like, oh my word, did we mess up? Like, did this guy slip through? And he goes, well, how are you here? And this criminal goes, The guy on the middle cross said I can come. He goes, I don't have any other answer. But I was on a cross, I was dying, and I looked to my left, and I was like, that guy is who he says he is. And he looked at me and he said that I can be with him in eternity. And Peter's standing there shocked. If your friend stood before Jesus, would they say, I never knew? I had no idea. I had no idea what I was doing was wrong. It's because we have gotten really comfortable thinking that there's all these steps that have to be filled out. And then when we check those steps and we check those boxes and we do exactly what we think we need to do, we think we're done. And it's sad. And just so you know, I'm talking to myself with this message. I have no one specific in mind in this room. I never do. Because I learned if I try to talk to you guys about what I think you need, I'm off. If I talk to me about what God is doing in my heart, weirdly enough, he moves in the room. So I'm talking to myself with this message as much as I'm talking to you. But we think that when we stand before God one day, we're going to hold up our a list and go, I did it. I went to church, supported a missionary one time, I went on a mission trip. At summer camp, I didn't cuss that kid out twice, only once. And apologized, kind of. And with my mom, eventually I said I love you. I was 45, but I've said it. Okay? And we have this super basic list. And we act like God's going to be like, oh my word, my faithful servant. You barely did it. I'm so proud. We act like that's okay. The truth is that there are people in your life that do not know the gospel, that do not know what is right and wrong. We always talk about I want to be this when I grow up, or if you watch a movie, you're like, oh, I'm the main character. But we forget that God has given each one of you a very specific role. You have a role. You have a purpose. Point one tonight is we have a God-given responsibility. We have a God-given responsibility. Matthew 28. Keep the point up for a second. I'll read this, and then Cody will put the verse up. Matthew 28, 16 through 20 says, Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, All authority on heaven, or in heaven and on earth, has been given to me. That's a lot of authority. That's pretty much the most authority you can get. All authority in heaven, all authority on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. The last thing that Jesus tells us on earth, the last thing he tells his disciples, who have been following him closely for 3 years, who stood there, watched him die a terrible death, and then watched him, and then for 3 days lived in this doubt of the person that we followed was not who he said he was. And then Jesus rises from the dead. Spoiler alert. And they're like, oh, you are who you say. Actually, you're more than we thought you were. The last thing he says to those people is, go, make more of you. You are my disciples. That's not enough. Go make more of who you are. And it doesn't say, go make disciples in all the churches with the people that you're comfortable with talking to. It doesn't say, go make disciples to those that you like. It says, therefore go and make disciples of all nations. Of every single nation. If it's a place, you're supposed to go there. There's a quote I've heard this morning. I heard it last night. I heard it a few weeks ago. It says, "The gospel is only good news if it gets there on time." What that's saying is, it's not that Jesus and the gospel story alone is enough. Because if you don't take it anywhere, then what's the point of it? The gospel wasn't just for you. The gospel is only good news if it gets there on time. Did you guys know that 42% of the world has little to no access to the gospel? 42% of the people on this planet have no access to the gospel. There are cities with millions of people in them that do not have a single church within the city. There is no way for them to hear the gospel. There is no opportunity. This is not your friends that have FCA and have Jesus clubs and have Young Life clubs all at school and how there's 12 churches around within a mile of your school. That is not this. 42% of the world does not have access to the gospel. If this room represented the world, it'd be like that section and that section don't get Jesus. No, but just for the analogy. So I have to ask you, are you okay with that? Seriously, are you good with that? Are you good for 42% of the world dying, never having even heard the gospel, never even had a chance to hear the gospel? And I think a lot of you know your friends that do have access, most of them aren't following either. So if the world were to end today, are you okay with over half of the people on this planet just not making it? Are you okay with that? Because if you are, then the rest of this message is pointless. And you can live your life, you can be comfortable, you can check the boxes, and you're good. And the Bible says that whoever believes in me will go to heaven. You'll be fine. You'll go to heaven. But if you're not okay with that, if you are sitting there going, how can I focus on everything that I have going on when there are people that are dying that have never had a chance to even hear the gospel message? Then this sermon is for you. Because when I hear that number, it freaks me out. Because I had an opportunity to hear the gospel as a little kid. My entire life, I was raised in the church. I have a heart for students your age. And I immediately think that there are middle schoolers and high schoolers that have never heard the gospel. And that when life gets really, really hard and they don't know what to do, they don't know who to turn to, they have no hope. They have zero hope. They have nothing holding them together. There's nothing that they can turn to. But it's hard to talk about people you'll never meet, right? So let's talk about those that we do know. You have peers and people around you every day that don't know about Jesus. And the problem is they know about church. They know a lot about church and about churches that have made mistakes, that have messed up. They know a lot about Christians that have treated them or acted in a way that is not okay. They know all about that. Because sadly, the church has done really, really good at being like, hey, you need to follow Jesus. I know the only right way. And then they go and they treat everybody like crap for 6 days. And then they come back on Sunday and they're like, no, yes, Jesus, yours is the only way. Your plan, Lord. Every time there's a pastor, a major pastor that makes a mistake, it's so hard. Because I think he's getting up every Sunday and he's telling people to follow Jesus and he doesn't even know him. He doesn't even know who Jesus is. You have people in your life that are begging you for Jesus. And they might not be saying it. Most of them probably are not. And most of them are probably against Jesus. But they're looking for something to cling to. America has a lot of churches. Would you guys say that America's thriving right now? No. Do you think that America's just totally an example of a country that loves God right now? No. So then why, if we have all these churches and America's falling apart, how good are those churches doing? I played an Andy Mineo song a few weeks ago, and it said, there's hella churches, but hell is still working fine. It's the same with, there's a lot of gyms, but there's still some obese people. Something's not adding up. There's a lot of churches, and yet hell isn't worried. Hell's got a really strong grip on America right now. And yet there's churches on every corner of the street. We have to remember that the only reason we're going to heaven is not because of what we do, but because the man on the middle cross says that you get to be there. So if you get to be there, then your friend gets to be there, but the difference is you have to tell your friend they get to be there. So it's time to get uncomfortable. It's time to step out and do something that's not going to always feel good. We have to remember, though, our role. We are not Jesus. I heard it said that we are all beggars. The difference is we're the ones that have found a place to go for food. Our job is to tell other people where to go and get food. We have to remember our role. And we need to remember our place with Jesus. So point 2 is Jesus is the only one that can heal. I've got 2 stories for you, and then we're going to play another song. That's also a music video that you're going to watch. So there's not going to be any lyrics in the song. Well, the lyrics aren't going to be up on the screen. You'll just have to listen. But this song is on the playlist that's for this week, so you can find it. Jesus is the only one that can heal. The first story you find in Mark chapter 5. And it said, there is a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out of him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? And his disciples said to him, you see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, who touched me? And he looked around to see who had done it, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. This woman had gone to doctors. This woman had gone to the religious leaders of the time. She had done everything she's supposed to do to look for healing. And she finally realized the only thing I can do, the only place I can go, is this guy named Jesus, who I don't know if he's even real. But she was so desperate. She was in so much pain. She was so tired of being ostracized. Because if you were bleeding, you were immediately made unclean and impure to be around people. So for 12 years, it's not that she was just had a sickness. She was alone. She couldn't go to anyone. She couldn't talk to people. She couldn't hug people for 12 years. Her family, to keep a status, would have had to have disowned her. So she said, the only thing I can do is get to this guy that I've heard can heal people. The key is she had heard he could heal people. But she had such strong faith that she goes, I know he's not going to want to see me. He's not going to want to talk to me. I'm not worthy for him to talk to me. I'm just going to touch the bottom of his clothes. The hem of his garment, which is basically the bottom of his pants. And I'm going to go and I'm going to touch that. And I'm going to believe that if he is who he says he is, it's going to heal me. So she does it. She fights her way through the crowd. She falls down and she just touches his clothes. She's immediately healed. And Jesus notices something. And what I love is those big, brave, smart disciples. Jesus is like, who touched me? And they're like, Jesus, there's a lot of people around you. There's a lot of people touching you. There's a crowd. Everyone's bumping. I almost wonder if Jesus was like, no, idiot. I know. Thank you. Thanks, Pete. And no, Jesus is like, no. Someone touched me. And this lady, in fear, Because I'm guessing, you guys, everyone knew who she was. She walks forward. She goes, I did. And I imagine she's crying, and she's at this point where she's like, if this doesn't work, why even be here? And it says she fell down. And he looks at her, and he doesn't say woman. He says, daughter, your faith has made you well. So not only does he heal her of her physical sickness, but that's probably the first time someone looked her in the eye. That's probably the first time that she got called something that meant like that was a good term of endearment. Daughter means you belong to someone. Daughter means you're mine. This isn't a male dominating a woman. This is a God reaching out to someone who's so broken. And he says, in case you forget, you belong with me. The second story is in Luke 5. On one of those days, as he was teaching, Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting there, who had come from every village of Galilee and Judea and from Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was with him to heal. And behold, some men were bringing on a bed a man who was paralyzed, and they were seeking to bring him in and lay him before Jesus. But finding no way to bring him in because of the crowd, they went up on the roof and let him down with his bed through the tiles into the midst before Jesus. And when he saw their faith, he said, man, your sins are forgiven. And the scribes and the Pharisees, or the religious leaders, began to question, saying, who is this who speaks blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone? When Jesus perceived their thoughts, which means they didn't say this out loud, they thought it, Jesus goes, hey, I know what you're thinking. He said, why do you question in your hearts? What is easier to say, your sins are forgiven, or rise and walk? But so that you may know the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, he looks at the man who's paralyzed and says, I say to you, rise, pick up your bed, and go home. And immediately he rose up before them, picked up what he had been lying on, and went home, glorifying God. And amazement seized them all, and they glorified God, and they were filled with awe, saying, we have seen extraordinary things today. So these people bring their friend to Jesus because they think, again, this is the only thing that I can do. My friend is paralyzed. There's nothing else that we can do except bring him to Jesus. And they get there, and it's crowded, and there is no space. You know those people that can't take no for an answer? Like, you're like, that's not going to work. And they're like, why? I think it can. Or they have, like, the dream. My favorite is when you guys come up to me, and you have an idea for a youth event. And I'm like, that's great. It's going to cost $175,000. And then you guys throw the question at me or the answer that you know I can't argue with, and they're like, you look at me and you're like, if God wants it to happen, it will happen. And I'm like, yeah. And you're like, and then you guys also challenge me and you're like, maybe if you had faith, God would provide. And I was like, I don't think God's plan is for me to buy all of you a cruise. I don't think that has anything to do with God's plan. And you're like, what if someone on the cruise needs Jesus? And I'm like, this is the dumbest argument I've ever had. Okay? But you know those people that can't say no? I imagine there's a friend there. The group's standing there holding their sick friend. And they're like, man, we can't get to Jesus. And one guy's like, no, let's go through the roof. And they're like, you want us to break open the roof of Jesus' house? And he's like, yeah. And they're like, you realize, like, we're going to get. And he goes, I don't care what I have to do. I'm sick of him not being able to walk. I will do whatever it takes so that he gets to Jesus. So imagine you're there, okay? That'd be like right now, all of us, we're in this room, and all of a sudden, just one of these tiles falls. And you look up, and there's someone poking their head like, hey, dude. You'd be like, what an idiot. Does he not see that there's something happening here? And they don't care. They're like, hey, Jesus, you are the only one that can do something about this. And then they just start lowering their friend down. And then what I love is Jesus looks at them and says, because of their faith, you're healed. Not because of your faith, because their faith, You are healed. What if the reason your friend doesn't know Jesus is because you are doubting God, not them? What if the reason your family is fighting the way it is, or someone you know in your life isn't healed, and it's not because of them? What if it's because you're the one doubting God? What if you've given up hope on them? That might sound harsh and unbiblical, but if Jesus heals people because of someone else's faith, I'm going to guess that there's people that aren't healed because of a lack of faith. They did whatever it took to get their friend to Jesus because they knew change happens at the feet of Jesus. Your friends cannot be fixed unless they are at the feet of Jesus. Your friends cannot be healed. Your friends cannot experience that unless they are at the feet of Jesus. I put this on a slide. I want you to write it down. Change happens at the feet of Jesus. This is not about you. This is not about how good you are, how gifted you are, what you have in front of you. This is not about your career. This is not about your dreams. This is not about you. This is about what happens at the feet of Jesus. This is what happens when you take your friends in prayer, in loving them, in being patient with them, and you say, I don't care how long it takes, I don't care what I have to do, but I'm going to get you to the feet of Jesus. I want you to watch this video. Do you remember the moment you met Jesus? That's a question for those of you in the room that have met Jesus. If you haven't, that's okay. You can just listen. Do you remember that moment? Some of you might have been when you were young and you don't remember, but some of you might have been more recently, or maybe when you made a recommitment. And it's like you ride those emotions and those waves. You're excited, and then you're like, what did I just do? What did I just commit to? It's crazy, right? It's a weird feeling. The world does not know about Jesus. We got to stop using the excuse that people know. They don't. They don't. Because whenever I've seen somebody actually come in contact with the real Creator God, they don't leave it. Whenever I've seen someone actually experience a moment with Jesus, a moment with the Holy Spirit, it changes their life. So we have got to stop using the excuse that I'm going to offend somebody if I talk about my faith. So what? Will you offend them? Maybe. When I worked at Dutch Bros and I talked about my faith, you know what I was shocked? I never once offended anybody in talking about it. Because they saw the way I lived my life, and so they knew it was real. I had a coworker. His name was Mason. He was married to a man, and he came up to me the first day I was hired, and he goes, I heard you're a youth pastor. And I was like, I am. He goes, I don't think you'll like me very much. I was like, why? And I was like, then I don't think you're going to like me very much. And he goes, why? And I was like, I'm overweight. And he looks at me, and he goes, what? And I was like, I thought we were just naming random characteristics that don't matter if I like you or not. And he goes, but you don't believe in the relationship I'm in. And I was like, do you believe in what I do? And he goes, no. And I said, cool, then we're on the same ground. So we can either hate each other or get along good. Never had a problem with Mason. Mason would fight for me. He would defend me. He would stand up for me. He came and got Chick-fil-A in the Horizon parking lot with me one time. While we're standing in line, he goes, I got to go get another one. I was like, for your husband? He goes, yeah. I was like, yeah, got to feed the spouse. And he goes, how do you not agree with me and treat me well? And I was like, if you treat someone well based off the fact you agree with them or not, you won't treat anyone well. I pray for Mason every once in a while. I do. We have got to stop acting like if we talk about our faith, we're going to offend people. Because you might, but you might see life change that you didn't expect. You've heard this story, some of you, so I'm going to tell it again, though. My best friend for, 11 years. Almost 12. It's gross. Sorry, I'm just not dealing with turning 30 super well. Pray for me. My best friend for a long time has not known Jesus. In college, we went to a Christian college. It's crazy. It's almost like not everyone that goes to a Christian school loves and knows Jesus. It's weird. Didn't know Jesus for years and years. Prayed for him. For years and years, I prayed for this guy. To the point that I got frustrated. Right before I got married, he and his wife announced she works for Dutch Bros. They were moving her to Kansas. She owns the only 5 Dutch Bros right now in the state of Kansas. They're going to have more, but she owns all 5 of them. And so they're moving to Dutch Bros to open, or to Kansas to, they're moving to Dutch Bros to open in Kansas. They're moving to Kansas to open Dutch Bros, and he tells me, and he goes, hey, so the last time I'll see you is at your wedding. And I broke down because he was moving away, had nothing to do with Jesus. And the last time he and I met one-on-one, he was telling me how the universe was sending him a lot of positive vibes and a lot of positive energy. And he's like, I just really believe the stars are aligning for me, man. I think this is a great move. And it was so hard for me to sit there and listen, but I just felt like I was like, man, I'm glad things are going well. He moves. You know, when someone moves away, you talk to him every once in a while. He came and visited me one time, and it was super cool to see him. And so 2 years ago, or the year and a half ago, the day before summer camp, this is when we were mainly pink team, if you remember that year. The day before camp starts, he calls me. And I run the camp. Like, I'm not just dealing with all of you guys that I love, but I'm not just dealing with all of you. I have the entire camp of over 400 people that I'm dealing with. So I'm working, and I'm like, bro, no, don't want to talk. And God was like, answer the phone. I answer, and all he says is, she's leaving. And he spent the next 10 minutes telling me how his wife was leaving, how he has no idea why, and I just sat there and I listened, and then he breaks down and he goes, I know why she's leaving, it's me. And in that moment, I felt God say, this is that moment that you've been praying for. This is that moment. You've been praying for a single moment where he asks you a question. And so I go, hey, dude, what do you need? Do you need a friend to love on you right now, or do you need a friend to be honest with you? And he goes, a lot of people give me the fake love. I'm tired of that. I want something that works. I went, okay, you need Jesus. And I said that, by the way, shaking. I was so scared. I was like, I'm about to lose my best friend. This guy walked with me through that terrible relationship I went through. When we broke up, he was there. When my grandpa died, he was there. When I remember telling him about Sarah. And when he met her, he goes, yeah, good job. That was this guy. And I'm like, I'm about to throw it away, tell him about Jesus. And he breaks down crying. And you want to know what's amazing, you guys, is that phone call, he didn't accept Jesus. I know you're expecting the super, awesome moment. He didn't. The next day, he texts me, I'm at camp. So it's crazy. That night, around 12:30, I get into my room. I look, and there's a text from him and a bunch of texts from you guys complaining about stuff that I have no control over / don't care. So I just scroll by all those texts and go to the text from him, and it's a voice memo, and it's like 6 minutes long. And I'm like, bud, really? You know those people? They're like, quick thought. And you're like, it's 11 minutes. Okay, all of you are looking at that friend right now. All of you are like, you, stinking you. So I listen, and he goes, dude, so weird. And keep in mind, listen up. Keep in mind, he doesn't know Jesus at this time. So he goes, crazy thing, man. I'm out front putting the garbage cans out. And he goes, and my neighbor walks up, and I've never met this guy, and he's a youth pastor. And in my room at camp, I break down. Because I was like, that's exactly what he needs. And he goes, he invited me to church. I said, come on. Tell me you accepted Jesus. And he goes, and I just didn't feel like going tonight. And I was like, dog. And I'm freaking out, you guys. He goes, but I'm going Wednesday. He said it's going to be a cool message. And he said the worship's high. My friend's a dancer. So he goes, he said it's some good beats and I can, get down to. And I was like, great. You're going to get kicked out of church. You're going to be dropping it down in front of the church. Yeah, Jesus! And so I'm nervous. Wednesday night at camp, I go to my room. It's 11:30 because I see I have a text from him. And I go in, and it's another long voice memo. And I sit down, and he starts by just saying, hey, man, I love you. I know you're working hard this week. I know things are crazy. I just want you to know I love you. But he goes, I went to church tonight, and the pastor's up there, and he gives a salvation call. He goes, I think that's what it is. He goes, it's the thing where you ask Jesus to do something with your heart. I say, that works? And he goes, and I felt weird, and I didn't do it. And I paused the voicemail when I dropped my phone, and I lose it. I was like, God, he's not going to get this. I'm so sick of thinking that he's going to die and I'm never going to see him again. Pick it up. I'm like, all right, what does the universe have to say? I push play, and he goes, Brogan, I felt so bad. He goes, Brogan, I broke down crying. I'm sitting there. He goes, I'm a grown man. Yes, I'm going through a divorce, but I don't think that's, I shouldn't be crying in public. And he goes, and I was like, God, I just missed it. I know I just missed it. If you ever give me another chance, I won't miss that one. And he goes, Brogan, the pastor gave the call and walked off the stage. And he goes, and I guess churches ended music. I was like, yeah, good job, bud. And he goes, and the pastor walks back up at the end and he goes, I missed somebody. He goes, somebody in here missed their call. Well, God's letting you know this is that next step. And he goes, Brogan, I stood up. He goes, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was saying yes to. He goes, but I figured if this doesn't work and she leaves, why even be alive? And he goes, and I walked down to the front, and that pastor met me down, walked off the pulpit, met me down at the front, smiled, and said, I've been waiting for you to walk up here. And he gave me a hug, and he said, I love you. God loves you. You deserve love. Three months later, Brandon gives me a call, and he goes, hey, she's not moving out. She's unpacking. He goes, we still don't share a bed, but she's unpacking. 3 months later, he goes, hey, she agreed to get marriage counseling. 6 months later, I'm in Kansas City. I'm standing in a church. There's a row of chairs in front of me. I'm standing at this church, and by the way, I was the second white guy in the room. And my buddy Brandon was the only other one. Okay? Everybody hugged and gave me a kiss on the cheek at this church and said I was cute. It was really weird. I kept being like, I'm married. And they're like, yeah, you are, sugar. And I was like, no, that's not what I meant to do. Oh, abandoned ship. And that's no point in this sermon. Sorry. And I'm standing there. And whenever I go to a church that I don't work at, it's amazing because I don't work at it. And I know none of y'all are there. So I can just kind of be me and relax. So I'm standing there like this, and I'm closing my eyes, and I lift up. And in front of me is my best friend. He's holding the hand of his wife. And his left hand is up high. And he's worshiping with everything he's got. And she is holding his hand with her right hand up. She's worshiping God with everything she's got. And I got to stand in the place where my friend met Jesus. And then my friend's wife met Jesus. And they're about to start a family soon. He told me, he goes, I can't let you be the only one that's a dad. And he goes, you know what's cool, Brogan? He goes, my kids will never know me without knowing Jesus. He goes, and my kids will not grow up without knowing Jesus. I got 2 chairs in front of me here. My next point is fill the chair, build the kingdom. Some of you know what I'm about to do because you were here last year when I did this talk. But for 10 years, I sat in a chair and I prayed for the person in this chair named Brandon. For 10 years, I sat there and I said, God, he needs you. I can't do anything. This guy needs you. Every single one of you has someone in your life that needs Jesus. To do another analogy, I'm going to ask Benny to come sit in this chair. Please forgive Benny if he tears up. He's having some major allergy stuff going on. He's not emotional, don't worry. So, Benny kind of took this whole message to heart. Man, I'm hurrying up, guys. Whew, got 11 minutes, Lord. Help me. Pause time. Benny took this message to heart. Benny had someone in his life that needed Jesus. That buddy's name was Camden. If you were in the youth group last summer or last year, you might remember Camden. Camden's played guitar with us a couple times. He's got a really long neck, and he raps. And some of you are like, oh, it's that guy! So for years, Benny prayed for his buddy Camden. For years. Like elementary, middle school, prayed for his buddy Camden. Benny, I want you to grab another chair and put it on your left. Benny also prayed for another buddy of his. His name was Marcus. So I want you to think, this chair is Marcus, and this chair is Camden. And Benny for years prayed for his 2 closest friends to know Jesus. For years. For years and years and years. And you know what happened in this youth group? At different events, they both met Jesus. One of them got called to be in ministry. The other one, God totally changed the direction of his life to the point that someone saw him and didn't recognize who he was. So this right around the beginning of Benny's senior year, he decided, I'm going to take on my school, and I'm not going to let I'm not going to let Satan have his way with Sherwood High School anymore. So I want you to put that first photo up, Morgan. You'll recognize a couple of these people, or Cody, sorry. On the left in the red shirt is Marcus. You'll see they're all doing the Brogan pose, but Benny recently smelled a fart. We got Marcus on the far left. We got Sydney. We obviously got Benny, then Camden, and then Caitlin. Marcus, Sydney, Camden, and Caitlin all met Jesus in this youth group at different events. Met Jesus. And they decided every day for their senior year of high school, they were going to gather as a group of 5 and take a photo. Every day. And then at the end of the year, I want you to put that last photo up. This is what happened. Every single one of those people met Jesus. Every single one of those people today are following Jesus. They're not perfect, but they are following Jesus. One of them has been called to be a missionary in Cambodia. One of them has been called to be a worship pastor. 2 of them are involved in a campus ministry at Oregon State. 2 are at Western Oregon. 1 is at a campus ministry in Nashville, Tennessee. 1 is at Portland State. 1 has been called to be a kids pastor and is on his way. 2 have been called to be a firefighter and are ministering and bringing their firefighter friends in that group to church every week. 2 of them go to University of Oregon. 1 of them is leading worship on a campus ministry as a freshman and started worship. They didn't have it. He said, hey, I want to join the worship team. They said, you would be the worship team? And he goes, great, I'll start now. That week led worship. The other one is on the track team at the University of Oregon as a javelin player and has brought his friends to church here and at a church in Eugene. So Benny, I want you to go grab 2 more chairs for me, please. So Benny turned an empty chair named Camden and an empty chair named Marcus and filled them. Not because Benny's holy, not because he knows how to preach. He filled them. So what did that do? It created another open chair. But you'll see there's now 3 chairs that are full. And now Marcus and Camden have their own people. Camden had a couple friends that came to this youth group and met Jesus. Marcus had like 7 friends that came to this youth group and met Jesus. 2 of them are in that photo that Benny did not know, but Marcus did. So when I say that you have a role, God has given you an empty chair next to you. And he has said, I know that 42% of the world does not know Jesus, does not have access to Jesus. But I want you to focus on the person that is sitting right next to you. Because the person they see every day needs Jesus. The person that you talk to more than anyone else needs me. And if you think your friend's too far gone, if you think it's too late, you're wrong. Because Brandon's older than most of your friends, and Robin's dad met Jesus last year at 76. Same story. Had cancer, had all these things happen, called her, broke down crying, accepted Jesus on the phone, and now if you show up on a Sunday morning, you see Robin, you see her husband, and when he's able to, you see her dad standing there. And he's not quietly worshiping. That man worships. You have a responsibility to fill the chair that is next to you. So tonight, we've got a quick, easy response. Go to the response, please. It's time to tear off the roof. It's time to stop making excuses for yourself and for your friends. I've preached this sermon before. How many of you were in the youth group last November when I preached it? Okay. Those that do not have their hands raised, I want you to know, most likely the reason that you're here has nothing to do with how I preached that sermon, but because I told our students it's time to step up and stop focusing on ourselves. When I preached that sermon, we had 1 service. It was at 6 o'clock. It was for middle school and high school. There were 40 of them in the room. 40. We average about 100 now every Sunday night. We've peaked at 119. I'm not saying numbers are everything. But when we're counting people that have accepted Jesus, they do matter. Because you might say, Brogan, you're just chasing numbers. No, I'm chasing empty chairs. Because I'm sick of watching high schoolers that don't have hope, that don't know where to turn, that don't know what to do, turn to ways that are unfixable. I'm sick of watching your generation just missing. But I can't walk into your school. I can't just walk into your school as a 30-year-old man and say, hey, I'm Brogan, I have donuts, I love Jesus. I will be arrested. I will be tased. Okay? I know, my dad was a cop. He arrested a lot of those people. Especially if my argument is, no, I know a freshman girl. They're like, yeah, let's get this guy out of here. I can't walk into your school. I'm not supposed to. You are supposed to walk into your school. You're supposed to walk into your family. You're supposed to walk into your friends. So right now, if you're taking notes, you've already got this out. Who is this? I want a name. Who is this for you? I want you to write it down. Who is this? And I'm being serious when I say this. I don't want you to just put, oh, it's anyone that's... No. Put a name. Benny put Camden right across this chair. And he said, hey, God, that's who I'm going after. You know how amazing it was last year at Rush? When you know that story, to watch Camden and Benny leading you guys in worship, knowing that 2 years earlier there was an empty chair next to Benny. Can you imagine if your friend was in here? Can you imagine if the name that you have was in this room, sitting next to you? How your life would change when you walked into school and you didn't feel alone anymore in your faith, but you had a friend that was meeting you every day, being like, I got you. I'm praying for you. Just, you guys, this is how that 42% disappears. So I got two questions for you. The first is, who is your empty chair? This isn't up on the slide. I didn't put it. Who's your empty chair? And the more specific you get, the more likely God's going to show up and meet you in that. Who's in that chair? And I don't care if it's family. I don't care if it's a friend. Who's in that chair? And then the second one is if you hear me talk tonight and your heart hurts, if you hear me say that 42% of the world has no access to the gospel and it hurts your heart, maybe God's calling you to be one of the people to go. And I don't mean to put any of these careers down, but there's enough business leaders in the world. That's great. If God's calling you to lead a business, do it. There's enough accountants in the world. You know what there's not enough of? Teachers like Michelle who every day walk into a public school that is blatantly fighting against the gospel and is loving on students. I love going to any Tualatin event because they're not looking for me, they're looking for Michelle. We need more people like that. We need more people that are willing to say yes like Sydney did and move to Cambodia right after high school. And whenever people would ask her, what's your plan? I'm just going. Well, what are you going to do? I don't even know who I'm living with. And you're going to, yeah, God's calling me to go. I can't wait. It got delayed, and those that know Sydney, that was driving her nuts. She almost just left on her own. So if your heart is hurting, maybe God's calling you to step out. We got enough people doing the jobs that you don't really talk about Jesus. So, we're not going to end on a video announcements. We're not going to end on the host coming up. We're not going to go play kickball. You need to figure out your chair. It's time to start fighting for the name that you put in that chair. And every single one of you, if you're honest with yourself, you got more than one. How cool would it be if next year I have you sitting up here? And I did this, sadly, all of Benny's friends have graduated because Benny's old, but I did this last year, and I had Benny sit here, and I had Camden come up and sit here, and I had Marcus come up and sit here, and they sat in front of you as a living proof of a testimony of a life change. How cool would it be if next year you're sitting right here, and that friend that you've prayed for, that you've cried over, is sitting right next to you? Hey, Jacoby, how cool would it be if your brother was sitting in this chair next to you? Titus, how cool would it be if next year I have to bring out like 15 chairs and your entire soccer team was sitting up here? How cool would that be, dude? It'd be sick, huh? Kenzie, you're graduating, but Haley, Jamie, how cool would it be if, like, we had Horizon Christian students that represented Horizon Christian in a way that meant it? Julia, Grace, how could it be? This year got so big you guys had to meet in the auditorium or the gym. You guys, none of this is impossible. Every revival that has ever happened on the world started with people your age. The disciples were your age. They were not much older than you. It was 11 dudes that had no business talking to anybody, and they changed the world. How cool would it be if next year I couldn't decide what story to put up here because there are so many? You guys, this can happen. This happened with Robin and her dad. This happened with me and my best friend. And so I'll be vulnerable. This can happen with you. And tonight, I'm going to tell you right now, this chair's name is Andy. Andy's one of my friends. Andy represents not just himself, but a wife and now a kid. So when I'm telling you this message, I'm talking about Andy. I'm talking about Andy. So we're going to end tonight. Leaders, if you could just make yourself available on the side. Here's the deal, students. It's 9 o'clock. It's crazy. I spoke a lot. I know I don't do that a lot. I know it's a new thing. Here's what you can do. You can write down stuff, and service is over. I'm going to pray, and if you want to go, you can go. And I won't judge you. I love you guys. I cannot wait for my little girls to get to know all of you. I cannot wait for my little girls to grow up in a youth group at 2. I can't wait for them to come home and go, Daddy, Noah taught us a word. And I go, really? Yeah, but he says a bad word and I shouldn't say it. Oh, really? Okay. You guys, if you want to leave, you can after I pray. But we've got leaders available. If you need to talk, if you need to pray, if you need to cry, if you want to write a name down, if you want to bring a leader into this struggle and say, hey, I got a name and I need prayer, they are available. And then if you feel God calling you somewhere, if you feel God calling you to go, if you feel God calling you to do his work, if you feel God calling you in a ministry, like my friend over there, Morgan, if you feel like God has placed a call on your life and he's calling you to go, I want you to come talk to me. Let's pray. God, we need you. God, we need you in our hearts. Give us the confidence and the courage to boldly step out. God, I pray that this will be a night that produces fruit, not because of me, but because of you. The gospel is only good news if it's on time. So God, fill us with the gospel. Send us out. Help us to go. In your name, amen. I want you guys to know next week we start a brand new sermon series that's 10 months long. We are going through the Bible in a year, cover to cover. February to November. It's not even a full year. Seniors, I'm really sorry. You're going to get an amazing half of the Bible. But the rest of you, we're going through the Bible in a year. And we're not just skipping over stuff. I mean, we can't talk about everything. But we're going to talk about Revelation. What do the end times actually mean? We're going to talk about the tough stories that don't make sense, the ones that challenge us. So if there's a time for your friends to get into this youth group and know about Jesus, it's right now. And if they say, hey, I don't know about that Jesus guy, be like, dude, my youth pastor is talking about it, going through the Bible, show up. You can have some nasty mac and cheese too. Okay? That starts next week. All right, you're good. You're good to go if you want to go. If you want to stay, the room is open.